brought us all today safe and sound to glorify Him. Today we're going to discuss on the Holy Trinity from the Old Testament and how in the Old Testament there's parts in the Old Testament that we can look at that shows us evidence about our God being triune. The first verse would be Genesis chapter 18, verse 2. Now we see Abraham. Abraham has the three visitors. The three visitors came to him, and three of them came at once. He's seen them, and he bowed himself to the ground. So those three being revealed was a symbolic manifestation of the Holy Trinity. This is one of the sequences in the Old Testament that's actually commemorated within our church during a feast. So this manifestation is to show how we have one evidence from the Old Testament that shows us that God is triune. So the biggest thing out of that event is how He welcomed them into His house. He gave them hospitality. So this shows how in ways that we know and do not know, God comes into our house, into our hearts, and we do not see Him, but we must acknowledge Him as Abraham acknowledged God. Now the second one we're going to be looking at is about the Father. So the Father, how is He mentioned in the Old Testament? So in the Old Testament, in many parts, there's parts where we see where it's mentioned, and the parts we're going to be looking at is the parts where it specifically talks about the Father. So the first one that's going to be talking about the Father is going to be from Isaiah, and that part within Isaiah tells us how He says, for if Israel doesn't acknowledge us, and if not Israel acknowledges, or Abraham acknowledges, God is what? Our Redeemer, and His name is from everlasting. So that part is telling us that if mankind forgets us, if people forget us, but God is always on our side. God is always on our side. So Him being called Redeemer, Redeemer means to save an individual from something. So God is our Redeemer. How does He redeem us from things? Things that we know and do not know. There's many things that God saves us from every single day that we're not aware of. So this right here in Isaiah 100% tells us that. Now, that verse right there specifically says, you are our Father. So we all say, the Father's prayer, we say, you are our Father. It's because we're calling God our Father because He has accepted us as His children. Now, the second verse is Isaiah 64, verse 8, where it says that the Father is what? The potter, and we are the clay, and we are the work of His hands. So each and one of us here, we're created by God beautifully. Beautifully, we're made in His likeness. Since we are the work of God's hands, no matter what the secular world tells us, no matter the standards of what the secular world tells us, how we should act, how we should look, or how we should carry ourselves, we should always keep our mind on the heavenly Lord, that God has created us perfectly. We shouldn't be insecure of our appearance. We shouldn't compare ourselves to other people. We were all made uniquely by God. Now, the third verse will be Psalm chapter 2, verse 7. Where it says specifically here, where the Father mentions about the Son, where He says, for you are my Son, and on this day I have what? Begotten you. So within the Orthodox Church, we say that the Father is the begotter, the Son is the begotten, the Holy Spirit is what? Proceedeth. So that's what it means. So right here where it's telling us is that God the Father is saying, I have begotten you. Now a lot of people look at this in a very, very twisted perspective, and they say, they'll connect it with, how a mother births a child in an earthly way. But this here is talking about it in a God ordination way, where the Father gives the Son all of authority to be judge over the heaven and earth, to have dominion, divine dominion and Godhead. So this is why we believe that He is one essence with the Father. Because God the Father is called Father, He is not greater than the Son. We should always keep that in our mind. Now the next part we're looking at is the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament. First one is Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Now we see how there's darkness upon the earth. The earth was with void and so much emptiness. But we see that the Spirit of God is upon the face of the waters. So within darkness, within our times of doubting God, and our times of where everything is gloomy and we feel like there's no hope, the one that enlightens everything, the one that brings light to the darkness is the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit came upon the face of the waters. So this is how we see that the triune God is the one that sustains this earth, all of creation. The earth, us, the animals, all of every living thing that walks on this earth and that is breathing and walking on this earth is sustained by the triune God. Now the second verse is Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 20. Now right here it tells us how the Holy Spirit instructs them. So the Holy Spirit is the one that instructs an individual to do things. It's the one that leads individuals to the right path of life, to us to have clarity of what we do. So that's why it's saying he instructed them. And it also talks about how that he did not withheld manna from their mouths. And he did not withheld the waters from their mouths in their time of thirst. So God is the one who's our provider. God is the one that we should never doubt and never ever think about tomorrow. Tomorrow is in God's hands. So in all of our questions of today, about tomorrow, we should all give it to God because he's the one who knows every time, every hour, and every day, and everything that's going to be forward and what's happening already right now. Now the next verse is Psalms 104, verse 29 to 30. Right here it says, if you hide your face, they are troubled. If you hide your face, they are troubled, meaning if God is not in our midst, if God is not in our life, there is no hope. Our breath of life, the source of life is God. So this is the reason why in many parts of Psalm of David where he says, do not take away your Holy Spirit from me. When the Holy Spirit leaves the individual, there is no life. He's a life giver. Now we're going to look at verses that specifically tells us that God is mentioned plurally. A lot of people outside of Christianity will question us in many places and they'll say, okay, where is God mentioned plurally? God is only singular. Now, this right here, these three evidence will show us 100%. There's one verse that talks about God being singular, and these two verses will talk about God being mentioned plurally. The first one, Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, says, who shall I send, and who will go for us? Who shall I send, and who will go for us? Us is plural. So when it's saying us, it's more than one. So that means that God truly is triune. The second verse, right here where it says, for us, what? That mankind was created by what? In his likeness. In our likeness is right there, in our likeness. So when it's saying our likeness, this is God being mentioned plurally. And so, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. In our likeness, and also to be made in what? In our image. So in our image and our likeness means that we are made in the image of God. We are made in the likeness of God. Therefore, mankind, humankind is what? Created with a worth. We should know our identity in God, that he created us in his image. He created us in his likeness. Now the part where it talks about God being singular is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So it says, God created man in his own image, in the image of God created he him, made male and female, created he them. It says it right there, that he created man, female in his image. So therefore, we should always keep in our minds that not only that we've looked at the Father and the Holy Spirit being mentioned, but also how we were created in a way that is truly by the mysterious work of God. Now the work of God. Now, within the liturgy, within our hymns, within our prayers. So the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit is glorified within the church. We actually also commemorate the Feast of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit descending down. So the Holy Trinity is glorified within the church. Now there's a beautiful way also to understand the Holy Trinity. The Father, what? He is the heart. The Son is the Word. The Holy Spirit is what? The breath of life. The Father is the heart of the Son and the Holy Spirit. The Son is also what? The Word of the Father and the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is the breath of life of the Father and the Son. The church beautifully teaches us about how the Holy Trinity is not separate, but it's the three distinct persons in one God. And there's many heresies that we should really be aware of. For example, Arianism. The Arian's teaching was that Christ was a created being, that he's not divine, that he is not God. Then there's many parts in the Old Testament that talks about Christ, and then we see how he repeats it in the New Testament, and we see that's directly about him. Number two, the second thing we should also understand is a lot of people tend to look at the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit as three separate gods. No, they're three persons in one God. Now, what makes them three? It's by the name, persons, and by deed. What makes them one is what? divinity, by will, and by creating everything that's in heaven and on earth. So this is the way we should understand the Holy Trinity. Thank you everybody for listening. Wassalamu alaikum.